So, my guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Rhonda Parker Taylor. Now, Rhonda wanted to write a book to prove to herself that she could. That's going to be an interesting journey to find out about. But Rhonda is more than just somebody who's trying to write a book. She is a writer, she's an entrepreneur, she's an academic researcher, and a whole lot more. Welcome to the show, Rhonda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait till we talk about not just how to be mindful in our own personal lives, but also how to put it into our marketing and in our culture of our organization. Because think about it. If you can't stand strong and keep moving forward in your own daily life, how in the world can you convince and work with others to do the same? So it's more than just pushing through and selling something to people. It's reaching further and deeper to understand where people are connecting every day in your life. And we've been talking about it just before we went in to record. And I think that your audience is going to just love pulling in, taking a seat, and saying, okay, this is what I needed to hear today. What do you think? Don't you think that from what we were talking before we got on the show that, there's a lot to provide for ourselves when we actually have an authentic conversation?
100%. And I think for me, what I see a lot, and I'm really interested to go deep into this with you, Rhonda, is this whole thing about if I'm an entrepreneur or a marketer or a business owner, maybe either a startup or an existing business. And I know, obviously, a lot of you listening to this, you'll say, oh, that's me. Hold on, they're talking to me. We often get tied up in the passion that we have for our products and our services and building our business, and almost lose sight of the fact that actually, it's only partially about that. Yes, you have to have something to trade with, but it's actually about us as human beings connecting, isn't it?
It is. It's about believing in yourself, believing in your journey, and adding value. If there's no value exchange, even in a friendship, for instance, or a podcast, if there's no value and you're not being real to what's out there and authentic, people kind of look at your brand like, why would I even want to consider this? Because they're not believing that you really believe it. You're just trying to sell somebody. Think about when you get that spam call and then you get one that comes out and it doesn't say spam, it's a local number, and you pick it up and then you're waiting to see, is it a real person? Is it a bot? And then what are they trying to sell me as soon as it's a real voice? So as soon as you become unauthentic to somebody, they can't walk with you with any kind of intentions because they don't believe you.
It's so important, isn't it? And I think that for many of us, and I'll put myself in this category because I find myself having to kind of course correct and check in and look in the mirror and just say, hey, Neil, come on, you talk a lot about this stuff. You're not doing it. It's very easy to say this stuff, but to actually build those habits day in, day out, moment by moment, it's hard, isn't it? Because with all the distractions that we've got with social media, with what's going on in the political scene and the current economic climate and the climate itself, there's just this catalogue of distractions, isn't there? This is not as easy as it sounds.
It's very complicated. Life is complicated. Think of just your own little cocoon, and you're trying to be this fuel your dream vision oriented person daily, and then what ends up happening is only way you can really ignite the success of your organization and yourself is for you to focus on the now and be able to say, okay, is the message empowering the future of my organization? Is it too complex? Is it simple enough that people realize, oh, wait a minute, this is something I can really use? Think of how simple it was when Disney started and they were doing their cartoons. And you knew little jingles like, you know, Frosty the Snowman, or put one foot in front of the other, or even, any of the songs with a hook or a gimmick, that get you where you're singing it all day long. You have to have something that speaks not only to you, because maybe what speaks to me is chocolate and somebody else a piece of fruit. So you have to speak the language of your audience, that they understand that your product actually can transform beyond the limits that they've already put it in. Blueberries, if that was your product, it's not only tastes good, it's not only nature's sweets, but it also has all these antioxidants and things that make you more healthy. Why wouldn't we want something like that in our lives? But if you don't add that value and the authentic view of the product and yourself, you could even have the best product, but they look at you and say, I don't trust that woman. Then what happens? Because then you look like the snake oil salesman that has something in their pocket and also pickpocketing you at the same time. You don't want that for yourself or your product.
It feels so outdated now, doesn't it? I don't think there was ever a good time for that kind of an approach, but it kind of almost, we could kind of get away with it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember marketing pre-internet, and there was a lot of kind of, let's call it traditional marketing approaches, which now kind of feel pretty ugly, and they feel really inappropriate for what is a much more discerning audience, no matter what sector you're in. People are a lot more aware of reality, of honesty, and we have to be transparent, don't we, in all of our communications now?
Yeah. And I think the only way you can do that is to deconstruct yourself first. If you don't know where you're coming from, your biases, your thoughts, your own values, and you don't really know what you're all about, your own integrity, then how can you stay a course and be true to self and your organization? You can't. So if you don't deconstruct where you're at, for instance, I was told when I was a child, never eat peanuts because you have a peanut allergy and you almost died. So guess what? I never ate peanuts. But then as an adult, I find out I was never allergic to peanuts. And then I was like, okay, the taste isn't so bad. I tried to taste the peanut, but I had an adverse effect on me emotionally, because all my life I've been told, don't eat peanuts. So if you don't know your own biases, your own teachings, your own thoughts, and you don't deconstruct them and find out if they're really true, you become unauthentic to everybody, because it looks like you're coming from a world or a leadership approach that only puts yourself as the victor, not everybody else. And when the others want to follow you, they believe that they can add to the vision or the mission and they belong. So you don't want to rub off in a leadership, especially in marketing, where you're the face of the organization, as being self-consumed. You want to add value not only to yourself, but add it to your group, your organization, your team, and the consumer, so that they all believe in your product as much as you do.
So what happens then if, I'm just a kind of a rhetorical question, but I'm really interested to know what you think, Rhonda, on this one. So what happens then if I do a little bit of self-reflection? So say I'm a marketer, I don't have my own business, but I'm working for somebody else's brand. And you've asked me now to kind of sort of deconstruct the scenario so I can understand myself before then taking something to market. If in that process of deconstructing stuff, I uncover some things which either I'm not proud of, or they don't resonate with the brand, or actually I'm quite embarrassed of them because they are true weaknesses and they're really not that appropriate. So I might be thinking, use the word bias, for example. So if I am just really openly biased in a particular direction, doesn't really matter what direction, but if there's a bias that I uncover, maybe there's some stuff that is actually quite ugly in potentially the eyes of the customer. What do I do then? Because this isn't a perfect science, is it? There could be some
Mm.
really tough truths that I uncover in this exercise. What do I do?
Well, then you have to set a plan on how you're going to address that internally with yourself. Let's take the male female dichotomy between two people. You know, there might be a leader out there that likes that, I'll call it sophomoric jokes when it comes to the male female um, branding and creating commercials and social media. But then they realize, wait a minute, if I do that, I'm alienating 50% of the population, most likely. Or maybe there might be 10% of the men or women on the other, on the other sex size that will think it's funny and laugh, but I've still, alienated 40%. Is it worth it to show your own bias in a branding scenario or a marketing scenario? Will it make your brand outlast you? If you were removed out of that scenario and you put another person in there, will they be able to carry on the mission and the vision as it is? Or are they going to have to rebrand it? Because now it maybe there was a male leader and then now you have a female leader, and it's going to be totally out of character for her to continue to have this branding or this marketing um, move that you have created. You've based it on yourself, your own biases, your own humor, your own whatever it might be. Whether it's right or wrong, that's not the question. It's like, can the brand endure after you? Can the brand set sights and reach summits based on that message? And then that right there, that helps you at least create the right message for marketing your brand. But then you have to deal with, like you said, what's inside of you. Ooh, I don't really like this part of me. Or like me, I'm trying to get myself to eat peanuts because they're so good for you and they have all the right healthy fats and this. But every time I put one in my mouth, I feel like I'm going to choke until I get
Mm.
it all crunched up where all I have is the powder. And it's going and setting the sights to reach the summit. For me, I have to say, okay, I need to reach the summit of my health. I'm getting older. I have to take care of myself. They say peanuts is one of the best things, most healthy proteins you can have. I have to get over this mental mindset that I have that's negative and biased.
So there's a kind of a continuous, I'm guessing here, I don't want to put words into your mouth, Rhonda, but I mean, there's feels like there's a continuous development thing. I know it's a bit
Mm-hmm.
of a cliche, isn't it? Continuous development, but it feels like that's not a one-time fix, is it? You can't kind of go through an exercise of self-reflection, looking in the mirror and seeing this list of things that you think, actually, I could improve on that. That one's not helpful. That one, that's actually weakness. And then just say, right, click my fingers. I've read the book, or I've been on the little short course on YouTube or whatever. I fixed it, right, on to the next thing. It's not as simple as that, is it? This is a potentially long-term journey, isn't it?
For me, I try to go through my life from 13 dimensions at least every 3 years and identify things that I need to change, things that'll bring me more joy, things that'll make me more intentional, which then also means I have to do it for my organization too. And when I do that, what I'm doing is I'm guiding myself to victory and let the world see it that way rather than, and then celebrating each win, small and big, with my team, myself, so that I can realize that that transformation is not never going to be stagnant. We could say continual learning, we can use all kinds of buzzwords, but really it's about being intentional in your life. Are you looking outside, enjoying nature? Just because you work in an office doesn't mean you can't see the outdoors. Are you taking your team's ideas and doing the same thing as you are with your own ideas, putting value where value is worth? Are you embracing practices in your organization that provides not only inclusiveness, which is the big buzzword of today, right? But also promoting the health and sustainability of the organization through looking past self. And that's the hardest thing to do. I did a study for the UN Global Compact Committee, which is part of the UN. And it's been a while, but it was on emotional intelligence. And we tested domestic leaders, which are CEOs or vice presidents that just work in one country. And then we did multinational leaders that worked in more than one country to see what their emotional intelligence were. Now, you would typically say, yes, the hypothesis is the multinational leader will have better emotional intelligence, which was true in most cases. But two categories that really popped out on the domestic leader was the general mood and self-impression of themselves. They had a higher impression of themselves than the multinational leader. Now, how can someone working in one country feel better about themselves and their leadership than someone that's able to work in more than one country? How can someone in a domestic situation also have a higher mood of their life than someone working in the multinational leader status? Well, it came down to, after we talked to people and look at the small fish, a big fish in the small pond syndrome. They felt so high about themselves, they didn't have to have empathy. They didn't feel like they had to be inclusive. They felt like the protectionism of their organization and their world was based on not being inclusive. And that message then, what ended up happening is they were not setting the sights on the summit for the organization. They were setting their sights on their own summit, which is dangerous because then it's not sustainable.
Isn't that interesting? And it kind of, I guess, for you, sort of going through that research program, it kind of, I guess, really emphasizes the fact that we have to keep, very kind of mindful watch on the world and trends and kind of the bigger macro, I always call it, the macro situation. Because otherwise, we kind of almost, our ego starts to play against us in terms of like puffing our chest out and saying, actually, I'm bigger and more significant than I actually think. Whereas actually, if you take the context of the real world around you and the macro world, suddenly you realize, actually, I am only a small fish in a very, very big sea. Right, where's my value? I can add this little bit here. Okay, I've done as best I can. And that kind of is a feel-good factor, isn't it? When you feel you have added value, but in a realistic context. That's fascinating, that research. I mean, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? It just doesn't feel like it would be that way around at all. But
No,
when you hear the results, it makes so much sense.
it does. And it kind of made me come up with a saying that your own self-talk, your own thoughts about self and others is your soundtrack for your life. That is your one hit. That is your thoughts. That is your soundtrack. So if you base it on your own beliefs and your own values, then your soundtrack is about you, and your marketing is about you, and your success is about you. So for me, I try daily, and it's a continual struggle for all of us daily as a leader, that I'm not only focused on making sure that I'm inclusive and I have a soundtrack that includes others, but I also try to make sure that my inner critic is also my cheerleader for improvement. Because if I can do that, I want that loudest cheerleader in the room to have positive thoughts and the positive thinking and be able to turn doubts into dialogue to improve and take away the fears of the improvement, but fuel that summit to be long lasting and sustainable.
This is interesting. It feels like there's almost a pattern, and maybe you can kind of guide all of us on this one, Rhonda, but it feels like there's almost a time that we need to be devoting to this kind of self-care and this self-reflection, to give ourselves time and not just get swept along by all that task list of things practically we have to do in the day. Feels like we need to, you mentioned nature, but taking a little bit of time out to just kind of do those little subtle course corrections, and maybe multiple times a day, just to ensure that we're very, very conscious and aware, not only in the practicality of doing things, but also in the, I guess, the quality of our decision making. We can't just run along at 100 miles an hour, can we, and do this?
If you don't transform your inner judgments into inner encouragements for self, you will not do it for your team, because you're a critic to yourself and you don't act kind to yourself, which is a negative mindset, and it doesn't have mindfulness attached to it at all, where you're thinking above one. So then you won't have inner encouragement for self, and you won't have inner encouragement for your employees or your staff or your salespeople. So then you have people out there trying to sell and promote a product under stress, duress, whatever you want to talk about, with a negative mindset of where you're trying to take your vision. The vision is bigger than self. It's the organization's pathway of making a mark and legacy for the future, whatever it might be. We can use blueberries. We can do, manufacturing of widgets. It doesn't matter what the product is. The value has to be there, and the employees and you have to believe in that value, or it doesn't work.
So if somebody was listening to this and they think, well, I get it from a corporate perspective, so a bigger organization, yeah, I can see that it's bigger than me, and we can all kind of work together collaboratively, and we can set the culture up, and we can make, great inroads into this destination. Well, what happens if somebody is looking to develop maybe a personal brand? So they may be a solo kind of consultant or solo entrepreneur who's not looking to create a business as such, but they have a tech product, or maybe they're providing a service, consultancy service, let's say. Could they actually do the same kind of thing and almost have a future version of themselves as that destination? Because that, to me, that would be an analogy that you could use.
Oh, definitely. And really, you have to look at it as if you're going to build it on, for instance, your philosophy, your technology, my authorship, for instance, me being an author, because that wasn't my first career. It wasn't my second career. It wasn't my third career, right? You redefine your success through mindful thinking and the marketing. You have to be intentional as, what is it that you want people to believe? We'll take my authorship as an example. My life has taken a turn that's 100 times when life hits. It's not been a straight path. So I was raised by entrepreneurs to survive things, because that's what organizations and entrepreneurs do. They have resilience, and they try to have sustainable marketing strategies, even when you're not in the business of being an entrepreneur, like when I was in academics and running a college. But boom, life hits. And I decided, okay, what I need to do is become an entrepreneur. The life hitting wasn't anything that I could control. It was a young man that I had adopted, and someone came in their job and shot and killed him. And I didn't have the capacity to deal with that same age group again. So I had to go back to my entrepreneurial background and say, how are you going to survive this? Well, then it was, you know what? You're really good at building people and building their success and consulting and mentoring. So I went to that framework and came home, and I was a sole entrepreneur for a very long time. And I built it on the fact that I wanted to build my brand to say, I believe in your story of success. And people might say, what is your story? What do you mean by story of success? I've been fired 4 times and this. But no, you have a story of success. Look at where you've gone through different areas, and you've rebranded yourself from medical to, maybe sales or whatever it may be. and helping them weed that story of success in a way that they're still marketable as an individual. Boom, life hits again. You know, so then I'm like, okay, now I need to grow it because I need to have the ability to bring more into to the cocoon and do what my father taught me to do, and that is provide jobs for people where they can work from home, COVID, and still make a livable wage. So what do? We take a life map, we change it over, and we say, okay, we're redefining this success to where I'm going to start doing my authorship, thanks to my sister, saying you need to get those books out there. You've written it, you've proven you've done it. Why aren't you doing it? So my brand now is Resilience. The first book is a fiction novel that is based on life balance. It's a crime thriller. Then there's a self-help book that can bring people in, help them redefine and be successful. Then another fiction novel on the victim mentality. Then another workbook. So we've created a whole new brand now that says, hey, let's help you escape with entertainment. But guess what? While we take you through the journey, we're going to make you reflect and think about your life and how you might want to improve it to where you're wanting to do the self-help also.
Wow. There's a word that really throws itself in my direction when you're talking like this, Rhonda, which is the word pivot. You know, again, I know it's one of these words that is often kind of thrown around, but it's almost a prerequisite. We have to be accepting that there will be times, as you say, when life throws something at you, you are not expecting that curveball, and suddenly, oh my word. But having a set of skills or having a number of core competencies that are kind of really transferable into other things is a welcome, isn't it? The idea of pivoting, for some people, they will run for the hills and try and avoid it because it's like, oh, change, I don't like change. But I can hear, just in the way that you describe it, those moments of pivoting were a real welcome to your world and to your life. I can just sense it from the way you describe it.
Well, and when you think about it, life, none of us change because we want to. You know, it's like a game of uncle sometimes where, you know, your knuckles are bending and maybe your organization's struggling, or, you know, something exterior, a mother or a father or something, you know, are at the end of life stages and you have to take care of them, or there's a financial need. None of us want to. But when you do it, it's a relief, because you know what? Sustainability meets your strategy. Your strategy will choke out if you're not creating change of some sort to meet whatever's in the environment, whether it be your own personal environment or the world's environment, COVID. The future of marketing meets those changes. And I think that's where we sometimes get lost. Unlocking the purpose requires us to map out life, which means we have to change. Life is not stagnant. If I stayed in the COVID world, I'd still be sitting in front of the television, watching way too much television, eating way too much DoorDash, be 250 pounds from eating all this salt that came into my door. And I wouldn't have created a sustainable future for myself, my health, my well-being, my emotions, you know, my romantic partnerships, any of that, because I had not grown and created a sustainable strategy. So your marketing is the same thing. The strategy has to follow the trends of the world too. And I'm not saying, oh, you have to do, you know, down this path. No. What are the trends? What is the mindset? What is, you know, the personal integrity that you hold that they also hold? How do they align? You know, when you align it, your product and your brand to something, then, you know, the troops will follow.
So, from your perspective, I'm just really interested to kind of go a little bit deeper on this one because I think there's so much value that everybody's going to get, and I'm curious for myself as well. So, in your journey, Rhonda, when you've had these moments where you've had almost like you could argue a profound change of course, or you've had to do this pivoting, let's use that word again. Have there been sort of particular elements of you, I mean, really the core you, that have stayed true and they've always been there with you? Because it would seem that when we do sort of do these course corrections, or we do pivot, or the world throws something at us and offers an opportunity, there will still be things from almost our previous version of ourselves that we would want to and probably should come with us on that journey. But there's a number of things obviously we can just leave behind because they no longer serve us, or they don't provide value. How do we kind of find, or do we need to find, the things that need to come with us on the journey long term?
Well, for me, it comes to my worldview. When I was young, my father would say, being an entrepreneur in manufacturing, you can tell the economy by the trucks on the road. Look at what kind, what are they carrying, what, how far, the license plates of, are they coast to coast, or, look at them and you can tell how many of them, you can tell the economy. And I would get frustrated with him. And I'd say, yes, you can tell the economy with them, but you can also tell somebody's worldview, or how the world is doing by the way they treat their people, the people around them, and the animals. And for me, what's always stayed with me throughout every one of those pivots is I had to guide myself to be the best version of myself and map out my life based on how I felt people should be treated while I was pivoting, and how I could add value. When I went from manufacturing, working in an organization with my family, to going into education, it was a requirement of my father to be in management, that if once you reached the management perspective, you had to go outside of the organization. Here again, life hits. Okay, it's time for you to fly the coop. And then if you come back, that's something different. But fly the coop, learn what there is out there in the world, and then you can come back and add value to the organization. So I was already teaching adjunct at the college level when this life hit moment came. And so I'm like, where can I add value? I enjoyed teaching. So I started teaching at a full-time basis at the college level. Then I became a campus director. Well, then life hit again. And then where can I add value? What still holds my worldview? And that was helping others be successful when they didn't believe in themselves, or they felt like they didn't have those opportunities. Some people, in some cases, maybe their manufacturing organization had downsized, and now they're redoing their skill sets, whatever the reasons for coming to me. So then boom, then it was COVID, you have to expand to something else. So but each time it was a sustainable model of how I viewed the world and what was needed and how I could add value. If you can add value and you can align your organization to that value, mission, vision, then you're going to have a sustainable model for the future. And then you can go through and say, okay, now where do we go to grow, or how, what is the message we want to do? But here again, until you've deconstructed and you've added value and you've created the vision, I say do what the miracle question, psychologists use it all the time to help us change our mindset. If you wake up tomorrow and the world is perfect as you want it, what does it look like? Document it. What's the building look like? What's the products look like? What's the house look like? What's the clothes look like? Go shopping, put them in places like the old fashioned paper dolls, when we would change things up and create their world. then once you've got that vision and you know where you need to go and where the value is to you personally and how you can add it to the world, then you can create a strategy based on that and break down your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals, 10 years. Where are you going to do finances? How are you going to do your marketing? How are you going to do, your leadership, your staffing? You can't do that till you have the vision.
So this deconstructing seems to be a word that you use a lot, Rhonda, which is, for me, really, really fascinating, because it does require us all to take that time out. This is not going to be you click your fingers and there's all your answers. This is deep work, isn't it?
Yeah. And it could be as simple or as deep as you want it to be when it comes to your organization. You could start on one segment: marketing. What have we done? Where are we going? Where have we been? How's it doing? What are our processes? And then map it all out. And okay, now if we were going, now let's do the perfect world. What would it be? What could it do? And then then wait a minute, we're not anywhere. How are we doing? That's not anywhere like what we needed to be. Once you do that that mission statement and that vision, and then you look at your process, it's like, holy crap, you're in trouble, because you're not anywhere where you thought you wanted it to be, and your processes aren't either. We might have something we created 20 years ago as our processes, and trying to do today's modern marketing of social media and branding and blogging and all these other things that don't really even fit in that model. So when you have someone write an article for you and you want it put in the blog, half of them are getting there, half of them aren't getting there. You have no idea if it was working. You don't have the data because you don't know how to even read it. So you have to really think about, okay, let's deconstruct one thing at a time, two things at a time, create the full vision, and then break them down. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's that you do it in a process, and that goes back to the manufacturing. Every step you take, you document what the outcome and what the cost is, and I'm not just talking financial, and the benefit. And if there's anything that's in that step that has no value to your process, then why are you doing it? Why are you spending your resources, your time, your effort, your emotions? Unlock your purpose first, find the value, create the mission and the vision, align everything so everybody knows what's going on, and then map it out. And you can do it in a strategic planning meeting or something, but it's really, it's not a bottom down kind of approach. It's a top first. The leader has to realize, wait a minute, I'm not the catch-all, and I want it to go beyond me. I have to be able to have a sustainable plan that includes your management and your leadership training and development. But you have to have that sustainable business plan to outlive and endure the person in the position.
So it requires patience. I think what
Oh,
you're describing here, Rhonda, is I mean, this is a perfect time of the year for us to be having this conversation and sharing this, because obviously a lot of people are going through planning time now, ready for next year. And if you're listening to this actually early in 2025, as some of you will be, you may well still be able to kind of, bolt this in, or maybe go revisit the original plans that you did, for this coming year. But it is going to require patience, because you're not going to be able to do, just by definition, all of this stuff all in one go, are you? It is going to be about prioritization of the most important things, the most important pivots, the resources that you're going to need. How does one go about doing that? Because it could be a big list, couldn't it?
it could. And I would first say, what is everybody doing? And if you're not a leader of the organization and you're listening to this, I would even suggest it, and it's not a popular idea, but your tracking of what you're doing. Are you doing what's best for yourself and the organization? And if you know that you're processing X number of invoices and this and that, and this is the time it takes, People will pad the numbers. Yes, that's not what I'm concerned with right now. What is it that you're doing? How much of it is you're doing? So you can really see the direction of the organization. When the first time I ever had to do this, I think I was in a call center. And, literally we were putting how many calls, how long, how many correspondence, this and that. And, a lot of people didn't understand, well, why are they watching over us like that? But if you can't budget your resources to know that, hey, if we're going to grow next year, we already have 10 contracts with different banks coming, and if we can't grow in every area that, 10, 15, 20%, because, without hiring X number of people, you've got to find where the resources need to be. And so no matter what the sustainable strategy is, you still also have to think about all the way down to the lowest level, from the mail coming out and, coming in and out, to, the actual, executives, internal and external scans of the world, to know exactly how you're going to manage those resources and be successful. So all of it has to align. So you have to track. I mean, there's no getting around it. We'd love to not do it. And data's easier now, because guess what? Humans don't have to track. The computers can track a lot of it. So, so it may require some investment, but where's that investment going to come from? Where are you going to get that extra oomph to be able to do it? And plan it. And once you've planned it, it's like the whole world comes off your back, and you feel lighter because you have something going on that will work. If you don't know your inventory, guess what? You can't plan. You can think you plan, but if you don't know the tolerances for your government project, you can't successfully meet it, and all those parts are going to come back. My dad had a practice that he would come in the morning, and he would get the whole mail cart, and he wouldn't process it, but he would look to see what had come in. Then he'd walk the plant, talk to people, ask people questions, get an idea of, and somebody might be frustrated if maybe a part's not working right on one of the machines, or something, and he would be able to see that. Maybe someone was working extra hard, and then he would go and look in the trash barrels in the back, the bins, because obviously parts that don't get made correctly are going to end up in the in the scrap in the other. So then he had an idea of everything in the organization without being a daily processor. You have to stay in touch with your people and the processes to make sure that it's sustainable beyond you.
I love that idea of walk the organization. I mean, I've
Mm-hmm.
heard this, and I've seen it, back in the day, when I worked for large organizations, you would see a leader, walking around, literally walking the organization. And I suppose at a micro level, for all of us individually, there's a kind of a bit of a metaphor there, isn't there, about
Right.
walking the world, or walking the marketplace, or walking our customer. We can do this digitally now, can't we? Obviously, watching the trends,
Right.
listening to the media, watching, social media sentiment from our customers, all that kind of thing. That's our now equivalent of walking the organization, isn't it? So we can all do it. There's no excuse around this, is there, at all now?
There's not an excuse. And you're right, all the digital can do it, which is great, because then you have that data. And then if you just get to know the people that work for you, and I'm not talking socially, you can still keep those boundaries. But if you're talking to them, the mindset of the employees. If there's job satisfaction, dissatisfaction. If there's a problem, if there's not a problem. They'll come to you if there's a problem. You won't need whistleblowers, because guess what? They're already talking to you. If there's an employee that's one of your best employees that's going through something, there could be a program that your organization does to help those that are having problems. That kind of goes back to the Ford days, where they had the social network for that. But the basic principle is upholding your own core values. And when you have that mindset, then you can align your organization to it.
There's so much to unpack here. There's so much time and attention and energy, I guess, required to do this stuff properly. If somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, holy smoke, I didn't realize there was actually so much to do. I thought planning was just look at last year and then see what we can improve for next year. But there's so much more nuance and detail behind this at a personal, but also at a professional level. If somebody wanted to kind of take this forward, how can they kind of either connect with you or watch your work, or maybe get a hold of the new book? How can they contact you?
I try to make it easy for everybody. RhondaParkerTaylor.com. All my social media is Rhonda Parker Taylor. How much easier can that be for people? Do the same thing for your organization. Align it so that it's easy for the people to get in touch with you, easy for them to communicate with you. What is your marketing brand? My brand is my worldview. Yes, my organization's Intelligent Solutions. But if someone wants to get in touch with me, they want to hear about my book, they want to do any of that, I'm transparent out there. My two books that I talked about is Crossroads. The first one is the crime thriller based out of Indianapolis, and it's about everybody's crossroads. It's endorsed by Meryl Hemingway, the Academy Award-winning actress and granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway. And the reason is, as high-powered and a type A personality as she is, she related to the main character, Paris Pennington, because she does not have any life balance, and she gets called to jury duty and her whole life falls apart. And it makes you question, are you balanced? Are you living your values? And she liked that about that. She said, even chocolate has an expiration date. So it's time for us to deconstruct and find out if chocolate does. And I looked, and it does have an expiration date. Then it goes into the life balance journey, which we take the case studies of all of the characters, and we say, okay, how can we live our own mission and our vision? And then we can apply it to our organization.
Wow. Rhonda, this has just been such a great and inspiring conversation. And I think, for me, again, as I say, this is just such a great time to reflect and get ourselves all ready for next year before holiday season kind of cuts in. So, I think it's so timely that we've had this conversation and obviously connected, and you've given us so much wisdom today. Rhonda, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Well, hi, London. I hope I get to be there soon again, and everybody else in the United States.
Thank you.